thank you all for staying for this discussion. The goal today, in my mind, is really to start this discussion about what are effective standards for teaching coding or computer science to. We have been focused on middle school, but definitely elementary school as well. And I'll go ahead and say that we feel like there needs to be a better development or more development around the standards, but that may be sort of presuming. We're going to actually ask you first to talk about your experience with aligning your teaching standards. I want to ask real quick, who here is a classroom teacher? Awesome. If you're a classroom teacher, who teaches elementary? Who teaches middle school? Who teaches high school? Excellent. Who here volunteers in the classroom but is not the actual classroom teacher? Or otherwise engages in the classroom with students? And what grades? High school? Okay. The first thing that we are going to ask everyone to do is, first off, can everybody access this Google Doc?
So if you go to the link Sean gave you, and you scroll down to our workshop, there's a link to this. There's a whole folder for you. And you need to bring it into your drive in order to be able to edit this.
There's a permission that you have to get share to do a
Sorry about that. What we're hoping to do is capture today's discussion through this shared doc that will be available to everybody, and also to use this document as a way for people who don't necessarily want to try to stand up or speak up and articulate something to be able to type it directly into this. Kate is also going to try to capture the comments that are made and help to organize this. So hopefully we will come away with a Google Doc that captures a lot of the discussion and becomes a little bit of a beginning of a continuation of this discussion. We would like this to go on. I want everybody to take maybe 60 seconds and think about their experience with aligning standards, whether they're ISTE standards, CSTA standards, whatever standards they've been attempting to align with, to their practice in the classroom for teaching computer science. If you're comfortable writing it up in the document, or you're comfortable talking about it, we're going to want to gather some of that conversation with you guys as a starting point for this. So take 30 to 60 seconds and think about, reflect on, and add that to the document. Does anyone want to share any experience with using any set of standards for setting up their CS curriculum in the classroom? You might have any specific thing they'd like to add?
Or just generally, which standards are you using?
That's a good question. What standards are people using for thinking about their curriculum for the classroom? Well,
well, Code.org has done a pretty good job aligning their curriculum to ISTE standards, next generation, Common Core, at least the Common Core practices, and the math standards and the ELA standards the best they could. So the work's been done for us at the elementary school level. I wouldn't say it's perfect, and I think it's still, there's a lot of room for it to be evolved further. But
is anybody here using the Code.org curriculum in the elementary school classroom?
besides me.
Anybody else have a set of standards that they're using in the classroom? Yes.
The teachers that I work with, I think they're all so geared towards the Common Core, and that's where they have the difficulty, even like with the Common Core, with like Code.org that has a line and everything, they still don't know how it actually makes the connection. They run into trouble. It's like, oh, I get it, but how is it actually connected? Because it's one thing to say, yes, this is aligned to a standard, but like for the teachers to be able to make that connection, they struggle with that.
Can I parse that comment a little bit? Because what you're saying is they've got computer science curriculum aligned to Common Core math standards?
Math or ELA. Like they see those standards, but they have a hard time actually making the connection to the practice of like computer science or technology to that, because they just think pen and paper or like print out.
So one of the things I'd like to sort of point out with that is what you're basically saying is that the connection is to a set of standards in a different subject,
right?
Which I think is an interesting reality for what is one of the realities for computer science is, rather than being directly linked often to a computer science standard, it's linked to a math or the LA standard.
And even the HISC standards, they struggle a little bit because the HISC standards are so generalized.
So general.
You know.
Yes, sir.
Using a lot of the CSTA standards, I'm teaching the ECS curriculum, and I kind of stole this from the BJC curriculum of the tech today. So I've been having students find tech articles, talk about how they apply in our world, and just, I have it in front of me, so it's 5.3, Computer Science in a Modern World, and so just making those connections. If you're not familiar with the ECS curriculum, the first 2 units are human-computer interaction and problem solving, so we don't really get into any coding, so they're making connections, and that's a pretty easy one because all the kids, most of them are reading articles on their phones and making those connections.
So the standards, so you're right, so a number of the standards in computer science, especially around some of the curricula like ECS, have an extensive section relating to not direct computing, but research about computing, which, as you said, is a little bit easier because you're basically there already is a general concept of what it means to do research about a subject, whether it's in humanities or science, and piggybacking off of that in a computer science setting has been reasonably easy to set up. Have you gotten to any of the point of doing any of the direct computing and working with standards on that? Can you say anything about that?
Yeah, so when we started getting into carving out algorithms and making web pages, I can't remember the exact numbers in the CSTA standards, but as you progress through the ECS curriculum, you get to HTML and then programming. So just making those connections, and I think it's really helpful for them to be grounded in something, because high schoolers, what I'm constantly reminding them of is it's a brand new skill for them, and a lot of them kind of get frustrated with they can't do it perfect right away. So having that general base and showing how it connects to everything, and then them finding kind of their own way into it is really helpful.
What do you mean by connects to everything?
Connects to everything that we're doing. I mean, we're going towards, everything that, yesterday I had a student lead a discussion on the Tesla car and its automatic pilot. And so even driving, the amount of algorithms that the car is reading to and making connections to say, this isn't isolated in a bucket. Whatever we do in this class can be applied to anything, and that's what I try.
It's really helpful to have that grounding in recognition. That's really great thing to point out. Leanna.
Gordon, we're using lots of alphabet soup here.
I'm sorry, does everybody know ECS, Exploring Computer Science?
Right, so we're like
Sorry.
CSTA, it's the
Sorry,
next generation NGSS. So what I've been doing is in the document,
Yes.
I've been going through and providing
Oh, yeah.
links to each of these standarding bodies.
Oh my goodness.
And maybe,
Sorry.
That's
well,
fine.
I don't, right, but just for the people who are participating so that they can follow up. Just a little bit of overhead for the ones that have been mentioned already. Hopefully everyone knows what the Common Core is. ISTE is the International Society for Technology and Education, and they've been the standarding body for technology standards forever. So they are everything from a kindergartner will learn how to use a keyboard and a mouse, all the way up to how to use a digital camera. There's some small computer science-y things in there, but they're broader than that. The NET standards are K-8, and they fundamentally drove the K-8 standards from CSTA, which is the Computer Science Teachers Association, for their K-12 computer science standards, which are currently undergoing revision. If you are not a CSTA member, I suggest you go to their website, CSTA.acm.org, click the link. It's free to join. It's a professional teachers body. It's great. You'll get mailing lists and lots of information about opportunities. NGSS is Next Generation Science Standards, and Exploring Computer Science, ECS, is a introduction to computer science that is breadth-based. So you heard him talking about it's not just coding, but everything else combining and around that. And we have a number of programs in New York City that are doing ECS and are offering more training for that, hopefully this summer. And then something else that will probably be mentioned if it hasn't been yet, and I'll link that in a second, is Computer Science Principles. This is the new advanced placement course. It has 308 learning objectives across 7 different categories of learning. Great thing to align to as well, because it's super specific. So I hope that clears up a little bit of the alphabet soup. And now
This one,
which one
as
is
it was mentioned, it was BJC, which is Beauty Joy of Computing.
which is a computer science principles
It's a computer science principles, but adding that to the alphabet soup. Anybody else have experience that they'd like to share? From Tracy? So Tracy, we're talking about the experience aligning our curriculum to various standards that are out there in terms of teaching computing. I want to make one broad sweeping statement about all of what we're looking at up here. 90% of this applies to high school, which is why we wanted to really focus here on middle school, because I don't think it's as simple as just saying, take the ECS class and teach it to sixth graders and align those standards. And that's, so ECS is a high school class, computer science principles is a 9th, 10th grade AP. You can enjoy computing, same thing. So the majority of this is at the high school level and thinking about how to translate this down to middle school knowledge. Yes?
Just some of my thoughts on what I do middle school, especially 6th and 7th graders, where we kind of mostly focus is getting them excited.
Yeah.
And that's one reason I love Scratch as an entry place, because we can still do really great concepts, like I'm teaching them, what would be considered computer programming concepts, but thinking about them how they work in Scratch. All the kids can get that sort of initial excitement and feel successful, which I think is a really huge part.
So we need to put a giant asterisk next to whatever we do with standards should not destroy the joy that kids get out of playing. Yes.
Yeah, but to go off of what she said, I agree with that, but at the elementary school and middle school level, I think part of convincing administration
Yes.
to where this fits into the school day, especially when there's so little time as it is, this is going to be a big part of it. How is this aligned?
Perfect transition to the point of what I want to talk about today. Besides the fact that these are predominantly high school and that there's almost no equivalent in the middle school and elementary school arena, what we are seeing happening in the space in computer science in schools in the last couple of years, particularly this year with the mayor's announcement, is a move towards broad, rigorous academic implementation of computer science in classroom settings. And as Alana pointed out, it is then very important for the administration, for teachers to be able to say, this is what we're doing and why. You can't have a conversation with Eric and Sean without them starting with, we don't know how to assess what we're doing because we don't have standards, and how do we know what we're doing as teachers? Is it effective or not? If we don't have standards, we don't have a way to assess against it. And sort of taking up that mantle, there in the high school setting, can you imagine what this looks like in 3rd grade, or in 5th grade, or in 7th grade? Yes, Tracy?
But I think people need to stand up for what is, not capitulate to saying, okay, we need to make it boring because that's what school is.
Giant pin in.
I'm not saying people are saying that. I'm just saying
Computing
that
must
really
remain
there is,
fun. We will try not to kill the joy. And I hope there will not be,
And I'm not saying people do that. I'm just saying, there is that danger.
There is that definitely danger. Once you start measuring achievements, and once you put the assessment piece in place, depending really on how it's done and how it's used, you do have that risk. And I hope that everyone here is still of the mindset we want to inspire children, especially the elementary middle school level, to love doing this. But I do.
It's easy though.
What do you say?
I think that part's easy. Like the second you introduce this to young kids, they love it. That's the
I think we're all on the same page with that. But I do think that as we move more broadly and we try to get more schools involved, we try to get more administrations involved, we try to move into broad. And I really do think that the word that I can't get away from is literacy, the idea that this is a literacy, that we need a K-12 track of what should they be doing at each level along the path. And I think instead of waiting for somebody else to figure that out, we need to be part of that discussion. And that discussion is happening at CSTA, and I know that CSNYC is engaging with it. I'd like us as the CSA community to participate actively in driving that discussion. Yes?
I happen to work in an elementary school for K to 5, so most of this, I appreciate what you're saying, and it's definitely not something going on in schools. But I know I'm in a school that's probably typical of many others. The principal manages every second of every teacher's day, and then some. So their basket is filled with a bunch of responsibilities related to the Common Core, and there simply is no room for technology unless the principal buys into it.
That is 100% correct.
So given that, I don't think my school will have anything unless the principal buys into it.
Correct.
And she's very non-tech savvy.
Yes.
So recently she's bought one of the carts. And my feeling is the way to get people into computers is to just get the teachers into it first. And to get them training has to happen during their official PD time. They have that Monday afternoon. So I think a lot of this has to come here with like really small goals, like just get on the computer and use it for educational technology or.
You've hit like 3 very important comments. One is about principals being the ultimate arbiters of what happens. The other one is about you have to train and engage the teachers, which I know is the CS for All mantra. And the need to do this within the PD context is something that I hear from every teacher I talk to. And all 3 of those things, I think, could be multiple sessions of discussion. I agree with all of those things. Going back to the principal one, I think principal buy-in and overall systemic buy-in, especially when you get around to training lots of teachers in PD, will come down to what do we want the kids to learn? What are the standards that we're trying to teach so that we can make sure if CS for All's mandate is to say every kid at some point in elementary, at some point in middle school, at some point in high school should take a year of CS, someone has to define what that looks like. And I think that rather than waiting for someone in Albany or somebody somewhere else to do that, we need to drive that discussion so that it doesn't kill the drug, so that we can still keep on top of it.
But one important point I wanted to make is regarding standards. You can have great standards and people can look through them and have not one iota on what lessons to present. And I think a lot of time, especially at the elementary level, you really need to start with a great activity that fills some of the standards and let people reverse engineer the standards from that rather than have we come up with a standard and move the other way.
Yeah, I think secretly that's what we're trying to do is take people who are doing this in practice without a fixed framework and then asking them to take their experience, generalize it together collaboratively into a community agreed upon standard. Because I think that that's really what we're doing, saying go to the people who are doing this in the classroom and make sure that what they're describing makes sense, that it's grounded in practice from the classroom. I think that's exactly right. All of that has been fantastic. I want to take the next step. Does anyone have questions or comments about where we're going or sort of what we're beginning to put together here? Any misgivings, anything that anybody wants to really add before we move on to the next thing? The next thing is going to be to look specifically at these standards and do a little bit of a comparison of what they mean. They're in that shared folder. We have handouts of a one-pager of the ISTE standards, the CSTA standards. What are the other ones? The user computing.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. The
math.
Next Gen Science and a Common Core Math standards.
Yeah.
We're gonna ask everybody to take a moment to look at these 4 or 5 standards side by side in the next section that says standards comparison, to maybe have some observations about how these are structurally different from each other or similar to each other, and what we can say about standards in general from that.
So you'll see a folder called Current Sets of Standards. It has complete copies of all of those in there. And then what we're handing out is just a 1-page sample from each, so that for this exercise, you don't have to pick through the entire set of standards. The Common Core math practices are not in there, so you may want to look in the folder for that.
Common Core Math, but it's in the folder.
Yep.
Alana, you want to?
It's also linked. It's linked on the last page we were working on the document.
Okay.
But it's in the folder.
So 5 minutes? 5 minutes to think, reflect on that. Enter your thoughts into the Google Doc or have something, if you say it, we'll get it in there as well. I'll try to organize that.
Start to, as a group, put some of your conclusions or thoughts into the document. What seemed useful to you? What struck you about looking at these side by side? That sort of thing. So maybe if every table group could put a couple thoughts in that from your discussion.
Or anything else you might have discussed while we were talking.
Okay, and let's join back together and share out. So, let's wrap up. All right, I'd like to know, after looking at these side by side, really getting to see the format, reading them, seeing how they're written, and their different purposes, I'd be interested to have people share out what you found useful about the different standards. Which pieces were useful to you as a Well, as a classroom teacher or whatever your profession is.
We'll keep it at what it was. Yeah. Later.
I mean, I'll be honest, I don't find the standards have been very helpful at all. Like, even as I'm looking at, I hadn't looked at much beyond the ISTA, the ISTE standards, but even looking at some of the other standards, like, as somebody who does this, I'm a math teacher who also teaches technology, finding time to figure out what I'm gonna do and how to do it in a way that's useful for my students is challenging. And I don't find that a lot of these standards really help me do that. Like, to me, I need to know what I'm gonna do and have it provided in a way that doesn't take up a lot of my time, but can be successful with my students. So, to me, the standards, honestly, at this point, the standards have been something I can throw on a lesson plan to say that I have a standard, and then I go do whatever I want. And that isn't really what's helpful to me.
Can you say more about what's missing, what you'd like to see in standards to make them useful? Because, I inferred from what you said, the math standards you teach to are maybe more useful than the CS standards?
It's a little bit, it's clear about what I need to accomplish in math in 6th grade. Like, I know very clearly what topics I'm covering, how deep I need to go, and not that the standards are perfect or, but it's much clearer to know exactly what a 6th grader needs to know versus what an 8th grader needs to know. In these standards, it's all very general. What a 6th grader needs, what I should be doing in the 6th grade. At some points it's like at some points I feel like I'm teaching down, that I'm almost like an elementary school teacher, and other times maybe I'm teaching something that I shouldn't be, that should be further up. It's unclear. So a lot of it is trial by error, and that's fine up to a point, but I feel like we spend a lot of time reinventing the wheel and experimenting rather than just getting done.
Just like everything else in education, this is all top-down kinds of stuff. And somehow we need to figure out at the teaching level what the students need to know and push the standards out of our own experience and push it up. I came out of that time in Berkeley and I look at what they're teaching at. It has nothing to do with what the world is about. They're trying to squeeze computational thinking into this already bankrupt educational model that comes out of the 1900s. And that's my rant.
Given that, what would you want changed, or what would be useful in that sort of teachers up approach for computer science?
I didn't just tell you what I do. I always start with scratch and then I differentiate up as the kids get better at it, and then they start telling me what's working for them, and then I get a little bit of continuity, and then I just watch them play. And they show me what they do, and it's useful. And they tell me what they're missed. So I'm more of a coach than an actual teacher.
Thank you.
I just want to say with me off that, that's like the idea, well, it's really obvious in math, but those things are driven by tests, right? Typically. You're driven by something not necessarily the real world, not really what you need. So this is an opportunity to move ahead without, saying, well, this is obvious because they need to know this because they.
Right. Standards are sort of intrinsically tied to assessment because you have to figure out if they worked or not. And what I hear from both of you is saying the assessment for these is more of a practice or project-based rather than, it's about what the students can do and create, not just a test of knowledge.
And not something that has been determined by whatever and it doesn't relate to anything.
They take it where they're going to take it.
I wanted to try to maybe extend on that as an idea that we can put in here to mull over, which is standards. for math right now may be tied to assessments for Common Core tests, and they're probably written in a way that facilitates that. Is it possible to have standards that are constructed in a way that does not lead automatically to standardized testing, but does lead to a more authentic assessment model? Is it possible to actually construct the standards in a way that guides how you can assess them? So you can control that process. This is an open question. I don't actually know the answer.
Yeah, so early standards, back in the 90s, the NCTM came out with the first set of standards ever back in the 1990s. And they were not driven by tests because there were no mandated tests at that point. And I think their complaints at the time were similar to all of ours right now. It's like, well, what do you mean by that? We don't know, right? And I think part of this is twofold. One, people who write the standards have this pile of CS knowledge in the back of their brains. They're like, of course this means that, right? If you ask any college faculty member who teaches computer science, like at the college level, like what does it mean that students will create original works as a means of personal or group expression? They're like, oh yeah, and here's project ABCD, blah, 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 right? They have that. And so I think one of the things that our job is, and I'm so glad Gordon's organizing this workshop, is to help you see exemplars of that, so that you start to have, and I know there are college faculty in the room who are sitting here nodding their heads very strongly, help you see exemplars of that and rubrics, right? Should the standard be that specific, or should we let the standard be more broad so that people can implement it with robots, with Scratch, with Alice, with Code.org stuff, with whatever they're using, and then provide exemplars and rubrics about how that meets the standard? Or would you prefer to see the standards more locked down and specific, right, that may limit the different ways that we implement it? So I think that's also part of this conversation here, is an algebra expression is kind of an algebra expression, is kind of an algebra expression for the most part, right? It's not happening in different languages and contexts, and we get to add all of those things as teachers. But when we think about CS, I think this is part of the work that we have to do as leaders, and I'm so glad people are here giving us this feedback, is we need to provide you with exemplars and rubrics and outcomes that you can then see that align to those standards. So it's kind of a two-step process to your classroom, not just a single one, because we want to give a big inclusionary option in the standard, right?
Go on.
I wanted to, and I'm not going to beat this to death, but I will say it a second time. My feeling is that a lot of the standards are overgeneralized, and the people that you're trying to appeal to are not going to understand what you mean because they're not immersed even in the programming background. So my feeling is you should take something that is known to be a good approach or model. If you look at the titles of traditional computer science courses, one was data structures. Now, how many of these standards actually get into the concept at that level where you can actually take the concept of a data structure and you can get into the coding and you need to be pretty high level at abstraction to do that. But if you take the concept of a data structure, you can teach the linked list and some of the sorting algorithms purely with icons. And so something like the concept of a data structure can be elaborated upon for what you can do with it in the lower grades to the top. If you don't start with a very specific goal, for example, I take data structures, but another one might be networking. Everybody has a router in their house. You can do all this stuff and your child can still not know what a router is or a server is and how to deal with it. So my feeling is standards should be based around what we know to be ubiquitous in our homes even, and you shouldn't be able to get through this thing without having knowledge of a router or a server or a distributed program. So I really feel that it should start from the bottom up, as this gentleman said, and then it should be graded for activities based on what the child's ability, what his working memory is, what his reading level is. It should all be designed based on the child's attributes, not what we want him to learn, but what he's capable of learning, viewed upon in particular topics with particular examples.
I'd actually like to extend on one thing that you said there, which is about needing to think about, and I would put this into a developmental progression, that at some point people figured out in math what you can teach kids at what age because they develop through the K-12 space. And I think a little bit of that is missing in the CS space right now. I do look at things like, well, we teach variables in algebra starting in middle school probably for a reason. And some of that may be difficult if you get down into certain abstraction. Dealing with variables in elementary school computing, you'll find that there are developmental barriers to the way that's just as an example. needing to think, you can't just take college level computer science and dumb it down to teach to younger students.
Then we are, oh, sorry, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to make a point coming off of some of the things that we've been talking about already, and maybe this is more of a meta point for a second, without addressing the particulars that were just brought up a second ago, but even the idea of what a standard is might be a good thing to keep in mind is that, computer science is very much in the formation stages. I mean, it's only, depending on where you start this network from, where you begin the clock counting, it's a couple hundred years old. I mean, it doesn't even really exist as a formalized body of knowledge within the human species at this point. That might be a strong way of saying we just don't know what we're doing. So maybe the one thing to keep in mind, so I work in teacher education, and one of the things that we think a lot about in curriculum design is the difference between formative and summative assessments, which I think anybody who works in a classroom kind of understands. Maybe if those particular words aren't familiar to you. The idea being like, how do we know where we've come? That's where you summarize, give somebody a grade. And then how do we address the process of going someplace where we may not know exactly where we're going. So I'd just like to throw out the notion of trying to hold some of this a little bit loosely, recognizing that this is really very much in formation. This is coming back to what Leanne was saying, is that coming together and having these conversations begins to address and inform the conversations which obviously have been going on for a very long time. Perhaps not necessarily even with the understanding of how things are happening, being really the instances of these things in a second grade classroom, or back to the developmental piece. There's a lot of different pieces, but what I'd like to kind of throw out in the room is that we're kind of devising a map, in a sense, and the map can be used in a number of different ways. It can be used to, plot where we're going, even if we're not sure, but we might be able to kind of choose turns, left turns or right turns. Another way a map can be used is the summative way. Did we get there efficiently? Did we get where we wanted to go? And to my mind, a lot of this is really based on the summative assessments. And I'd like to maybe throw out, we're still making it up as we go along. So if that makes any sense, but it made sense to me when I was listening to Leanne. So.
We're going to take 2 more comments, and then we're actually going to go directly to what you just said, which is what is a standard and how do we make them useful?
How do you do standards without teaching to the middle? Because I have third graders who can variables, no problem. I have 6th graders who still are like, and if we make all these standards, then what do we do from there? I know, but how are we going to do it different? Because we're writing everything now, so how do we build that in from the beginning instead of trying to think of it later?
So can I flip that on its head a little bit? So let's stop thinking about standards from a point of assessment. We're so foundling, we're so new, we're kind of like a little toddler, right? And how many people, like if you have a kid, how many people read baby books about what you're supposed to teach your kid when and how, right? And we have to think about our standards not necessarily at this point for our students, but for our teachers and for our administrators. The standards right now are ways to communicate what should be in your classes and what are the fun things around the edges, right? No matter what, these really should think about them like mastery-based objectives. So it's not about the middle kid getting it, it's about all the kids getting it, right? And so what are the things that are fundamental for if a kid passes your class that they should have knowledge in? And then hopefully, through whatever program you're working with or interacting with, you're building experiences on top of that lets those middle kids shine and those high-end kids take it to new heights, right? And so where is the communication vehicle through those standards for our teachers and administrators about what's important about computer science? How should it fit in a school? Why will teaching them Word and Excel not meet these outcomes and goals, right? And I think that's really what we're trying to get here. I hope, and I know what Gordon wants too, is to help think about what's that communication vehicle to schools, to teachers, to administrators, to help them choose a program, to help them find what's going to fit with their school culture, to help teachers go, you know what, I'm really interested in X. Which program takes X and these standards, which are really important, and combines them in a meaningful way for both me, my students, my school community, everything.
And the truth of the matter is that elementary school teachers and middle school teachers, they all have some sort of background in math and science and literacy and history, but most don't have any background in CS and therefore have a fear of it. So when you said these standards are actually for the teachers and administrators, it's for them to understand what needs to be taught and why, because they really have no idea.
So, for the next piece, I really want to build off of this last conversation that's been happening. I really like the idea of this is a map that we're still building, and nobody really knows what it looks like yet, but it's a map that needs to guide people in elementary and middle school that are, and also like computer science is a lot of different branches. We've heard about people using Scratch or data, different, so there's so many different pieces of computer science. So I think the next thing that we want to look at is what makes a standard useful, and also what do we want included, what broader topics do we want included in that map. So we're going to pass out a few documents that are just sort of reference guides, and if you scroll to the last heading in the document, it'd be great if you could take some time with your table to look over the two documents I'm going to pass out. One is like, what are learning standards and what are criteria for a good learning standard? This is not the end all be all. There's probably a much broader range of criteria, so just take this with a grain of salt when I pass it out. And the other thing I'm going to pass out is a document that we use that we developed at Codesters for ourselves that helped us guide our Python instruction. It is very specific to Python, so it wouldn't be something that would be general enough for this map, but it's something that there was a hole kind of in the standards for us, so we developed to help guide us. And so it's just sort of an example of what branches might start to look like on this map. So if you could look at the documents after they're passed out, discuss with your table what you would like to see, what branches, what bigger categories you would like to see hit on this map for elementary or middle school grade levels. Any questions about that? Does that make sense? Yeah, let's do 10 minutes and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so let's wrap up this session. It's almost time to switch. If I can get everyone's attention, let's wrap up your conversation. If you want to add anything from your conversation to the document, now's a great time to add it. We'll make sure that you still have access to this so that you can go back to it later. This is really the start, the beginning of a conversation that is ongoing. As you may know, CSTA is also having this conversation. They had an open call for ideas about their reworking their standards, and especially in New York City, we have the CS for All initiative. This is going to be an ongoing conversation in our community, and I really encourage everybody to keep it going, to continue to talk about it among teachers and people who are involved in developing the standards, all of that. Do you want to say anything?
Do we want to get some of the comments around,
yes,
we were looking at what makes standards useful and effective. And I think a really interesting idea here is that if we are tasked with creating these standards or the guidelines for these standards, we get some say into how they're built and what they're used for. So let's take advantage of that opportunity. Let's own the space before a bureaucrat takes it over and does that for us.
Yeah.
So who wants to share something about what, about the conversation at their table about what makes a useful or effective standard?
Yes.
I believe that the standards become useful for our group of children at elementary school is when it helps reinforce the math and DLA standards. that's when it seems like all stakeholders will buy into it. It builds on, you build it up.
I totally agree that making this a literacy that aligns to, and I would include science and humanities in there as well. I do think that that's definitely the case. I will add though that I do think it needs its own set of standards distinct from, so that it's not just here, not that it doesn't just link to Common Core Math and ELA, but that it has a distinct set of standards. But as a great literacy, it does cross, it has the potential to cross a lot of subject boundaries and inject into those subjects, and I would agree with that.
It almost sounds like we have to find a way to sell it to the political audience, you know, right? Coming up with a way that it will cover all of that, plus the other aspects that you're saying, so that they will buy into it and we can get it incorporated.
The phrase for that is we have to show how this drives student achievement. If it doesn't come back to student achievement, then principals and administrators will eventually shut it down. So that is, at the end of the day, we are tasked with using taxpayer dollars to drive student achievement as a system, as long as for public schools. So it does have to come back to that at the end of the day.
Would anyone else like to share with our tables conversation?
I mean, I think one of the things that we talked about was kind of looking at what we're doing at different levels of education. You know, how does what we do in the elementary school play into what we do in middle school? How does that support what happens in high school? And having some sense, and you know, for those of us who work in the city where we get kids from lots of different, like I work in a middle school, we pull from probably 10 different elementary schools. My experience is that what I get for a sixth grader is dramatically different depending on what school they came from, and trying to get to a point where there's a little bit more consistency, at least in some background knowledge that they have by the time we get them at different levels.
Yeah. I think in an idealized world, this ends up having some combination of a map of the subject domain, so a knowledge map, aligned to a map of student developmental progress, aligned to where it can attach to other subjects at appropriate grade levels, and you get kind of a larger K-12 sequence that will be a standalone pillar for how we guide a full path of science instruction. As a long-term goal, it'll take years to get there, but I think that's kind of the goal. Any other thoughts before we wrap up? I think, what's our timing? Are we? Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions anybody wants to take away before we wrap up? And again, I would like to say again that we'd like this to be an ongoing discussion, that we wanted this to be a chance for us to take what we built internally and share it and say, we obviously need to generalize, we obviously need to grow from this, but we would like to start to see the discussion, because I do think we will all be able to do our jobs much more effectively if we have a sort of a common understanding of what we are doing with these kids and how to know if we're doing it well. To echo what I hear from Sean and Eric constantly. I think we should take it on ourselves to recognize in that particularly K-8 space, it's a wide open landscape, but we have, I think, some foundation for how we can go about building that map and building those standards, and that we should take that up as a task. Well, thank you all for taking the time, and thank you for being very active participants in the discussion, and we'll make sure this document stays available if people want to add to it, if people want to share. But thank you all, you guys have been an amazing group.